to the auspicious north. The south is considered to be inauspicious because the god of death, Yama, rules the south. The north is considered auspicious because god Shiva, who is famous for granting spiritual life, and the angel Kubera, who is famous for granting materialistic prosperity, rule the north. The inauspiciousness of the south increases even more due to the presence of the hot Agni as well as the demon Nirruti in the south. In the north, the presence of the angel Vayu also increases the auspiciousness because Vayu is the father of god Hanuman. Therefore, the period when the sun moves from south to north, which is from the zodiac signs of Makara or Capricorn to Gemini, that period is Uttarayanam, and that indicates positive progress. Conversely, the period when the sun moves from north to south, which is when it enters Karkataka, the Cancer sign, to Sagittarius, which is Dhanu, then that indicates an increase in inauspiciousness or negativity. Now the basic question comes as to how can there be betterment or degradation when one moves from one place to another when both points are located at the same level. Now both betterment and degradation can exist at the same level. Let us take the case of a common man who does traditional rituals and he leads the life of an ordinary householder on the path of pravrutti, which is worldly life. So this is a person in pravrutti marga only. This soul usually performs traditional rituals, but he performs them without the knowledge of the background of those rituals, without knowing why those rituals are being done, what is the hidden meaning behind those rituals. So he simply follows the age-old tradition of the ancestors. And such a state of blindly following those age-old traditions is, it represents the South, in which the departed ancestors live. Such blind performance of rituals yields negative results. This way of doing rituals is the path of Purva Mimamsa. According to the philosophy of Purva Mimamsa, the mere utterance of the sounds of Vedic hymns, even without knowing the meaning of those hymns, is treated to be the highest. It is a blind path of ignorance of the knowledge of the Veda. Swamiji has repeatedly explained that the word Veda itself means knowledge. So in the mantras of the Veda, there is meaning hidden in those hymns. If you don't understand the meaning, then simply reciting that is not the Veda actually. It is just blind recitation. One has to understand the meaning. So Swamiji has given many discourses to explain that previously. Now these followers who blindly recite the Veda, they are simply fascinated by the practices followed by their ancestors. This blind path is represented by the Dakshinayanam, which is the transit of the sun towards the south from the signs of Cancer to Sagittarius, which is Karkataka to Dhanu. Such blind practice without knowledge is called Abhyasa in the Gita, and it is also called as Krishna Gati or the dark path. So Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat, Lord Krishna says in the Gita. So jnanam is better than abhyasa. So what is abhyasa? Abhyasa is the blind practice without understanding the meaning. And in the 8th chapter, he also explains Shukla Krishna Gati hete Jagata Shashvate Mate. So the Krishna Gati is the dark path. And this Krishna does not refer to Lord Krishna. It means Krishna means dark. So the dark path, which in the 8th chapter he explains that people following the dark path will be born again and again in this samsara. They will be trapped in this worldly bonds. So that Krishna path is the blind practice without knowing the meaning. And the opposite, northward path, is called the Shukla Gati. Shukla Gati or the bright path. It is also called as Uttarayanam, and it means the path of knowledge. And it represents the progress towards the north where angels live. So this northward transition, which is what is happening, which started happening since day before yesterday on Makara Sankranti, the sun started entered into Makara Rashi. So the northward transition has started. So this northward transition is auspicious because it is the transition from the state of blind practice to the state of practice with knowledge. So the Gita says that you should not practice anything without knowing it thoroughly. Jnatva kurvita karmani. Upon knowing, you do the karmas, but you do it upon knowing the knowledge. So knowing the meaning behind those actions. The Gita also says that the transition from abhyasa, blind practice, to jnana or knowledge is the best. That is what I mentioned earlier. Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasa, jnana dhyanam. And then later on he says better than jnana is dhyana and all that. That also Swamiji has explained many times. So basically now we are going to see the example of how you can have that from going from blind practice to practicing with knowledge, how we can achieve progress even being at the same level. So the southward transit of the sun represents pravrutti or worldly life. The northward transit of the sun represents nivrutti or spiritual life. The Veda clearly says that both these paths, nivrutti and pravrutti, are diagonally opposite. Duramete viparite vishuchi. They are like the opposite ends of a like in a compass you have the needle, right? So one is pointing to the north, other is pointing to the south. They are opposites, mutually opposite. In the first case, the level of the soul remains one and the same. So we are taking the case where the progress is where the person moves from one point to another point at the same level. So in that case, the level of the soul remains one and the same, but the person moves from the state of following the tradition blindly to following it with knowledge. So the person remaining at the same basic level makes some progress by doing this. Let us take the example of a person who is a normal householder doing traditional rituals. The traditional practice is that when a close relative dies, the person is supposed to take a bath over the head and not participate in the worship of God for some days. The person following the blind path of abhyasa follows this practice blindly merely because his ancestors followed it. Now here by ancestors, we only mean the immediate few generations of the person's ancestors, which is since the Kali age started. Before that, the people were sages. So this idea of blind abhyasa entered the brains of people only from the beginning of the Kali age, which is relatively recent. Before that, the very ancient ancestors were sages who always performed all practices only after thoroughly analyzing them with sharp knowledge. The background of this practice, we are referring to the practice of having a bath over the head and not worshipping God. The background of this practice is that when a close relative dies, your mind is in a state of shock and grief. Hence, an overhead bath with cold water is advised so that the mind becomes cool. For some days, worship is prohibited because the mind of the person is filled with grief due to the memories of the departed soul. Under such circumstances, the person cannot properly concentrate his mind on God. Hence, this practice is fully meaningful in the case of ordinary souls losing their dear relatives. But if the departed soul had a bad character and was not liked by his or her relatives, the relatives become happy on hearing the death of that bad relative. In that case, the cold water bath and avoiding the worship of God for some days is not at all necessary. This is the difference between the abhyasa of the southward path and the jnana of the northward path. So here in this first case, what we observe is that the person remains a householder. He remains in worldly life. He is basically still in the path of pravrutti. Here, the devotion and practical sacrifice to God is not at all in the context. So in that itself, being in the pravrutti marga itself, instead of doing the actions without understanding, we can always do it with the knowledge behind those traditional practices. So then there is still progress. So being at the same level, you are still making progress. That is the point of this first case. Now we go to the second case. In the second case, we will look at an example where there is progress there is a significant progress because the person goes from a lower level to a higher level. So here there is a rise in the spiritual level of the person. This can be explained by taking another aspect of performing a traditional ritual. Traditional rituals are usually accompanied by donation or charity to deserving receivers. The ritual gives a positive fruit only if the receiver of your charity is perfectly deserving. If the receiver is not deserving, the charity becomes sin, and one receives punishment, which is the fruit of the sin. Ordinary people are misled because they do charity without assessing the deservingness of the receiver. The point of the receiver's deservingness is stressed by the Veda. It is said that one should perform the ritual using sharp knowledge called samvit, samvidadeyam. It is told in the Veda. And what is this samvit? It is the sharp knowledge or analysis in order to discriminate between the deserving receiver and the undeserving receiver of your charity. Ordinary people following the blind path of abhyasa perform charity disregarding this important point. Instead, they concentrate on the place and time of performing the ritual. The Veda says that charity done as part of the ritual must be done to a person who not only has perfect spiritual knowledge, but who also does not have any aspiration for receiving the donation from the donor. So two criteria are there. First is he must have perfect spiritual knowledge. And the second is that he should not have any aspiration for receiving any donation from you. So shrotriyasya cha kamahatasya. Shrotriya, he should be shrotriya, means well versed in spiritual knowledge, and he should be akamahata. He should be free of any desire. So such a deserving receiver can be the Sadguru or a Guru or a devotee. The Sadguru is the human incarnation of God, whereas the Guru and the devotee are souls. But they too have perfect spiritual knowledge, which they have received from the Sadguru. So the Sadguru is the highest, obviously. But the Guru and the devotee, as long as they are following the footsteps of the Sadguru, giving the same knowledge of the Sadguru, then they can also be considered to be deserving recipients of the donation. So now observe in this second case that the person from a blind, instead of following the blind practice of simply donating without analyzing the deservingness, instead of that blind practice or abhyasa, the person has done karma phalatyaga to the Sadguru or to a Guru or some deserving person. So here, this is part of spiritual life. This is nivrutti. So he has moved from the pravrutti or worldly life to nivrutti, which is spiritual life. This progress is a very significant progress, and it represents a vertical rise in the spiritual level of the person. So again, here it is also this change in direction, this movement, this transition is possible only by knowledge, because he is using samvit, samvidadeyam. Now with samvit he is donating rather than donating blindly. Within the same discourse, now the next section is this generation is a very fortunate generation. Swamiji is saying this generation is very fortunate to get this excellent spiritual knowledge from God Datta. Especially this family of God Datta is more fortunate to get this excellent spiritual knowledge or prajnanam from God Datta. Some time back, one devotee asked why such knowledge was not given by the previous human incarnations of God Datta. I replied that the past human incarnations of God Datta also knew this knowledge, but they could not give it to people then because the scientific IQ of people was not well developed in those days as it is developed today. Hence, the reason lies in the maturity of the receivers of the knowledge and not in the capability of the previous human incarnations of God Datta. These spiritual discussions or satsangas are very good and have been strongly recommended by Shankaracharya, by Adi Shankara, as the first step on the right spiritual path. Shankaracharya says Satsangatve Nissangatvam, Nissangatve Nirmohatvam, and so on. So everything starts with Satsanga. That is the first and most important step. Then Swamiji continues. He says, Datta Swami is giving the knowledge as a single person, and he is great. Datta Swami stands for knowledge, which is Jnanam or Jnana Yoga. Devi and Padmaram are singing devotional songs very well, and both of them stand for devotional songs, which is Ganam or Bhakti Yoga. They are greater than Datta Swami. Two are stronger than one, and hence both of them together are stronger than Datta Swami. Also, Ganam or Bhakti comes only after Jnanam. Hence, Ganam, which is the fruit, is better than Jnanam, which is the effort to attain that fruit. All the other devotees stand for sacrifice, which is Danam or Karma Yoga. It is the sacrifice or offering of service, which is the sacrifice of work, which is the offering of service, and also the sacrifice of the fruit of one's work. All these other devotees, except the three of us mentioned, myself, Devi, and Padmaram, are doing this third step of Danam. You all are sacrificing work, which is service, and the fruit of your work, which is donation. All of you are the greatest. Thus, Jnanam, Ganam, and Danam are great, greater, and greatest, respectively. In olden days, when kings used to perform yajna or sacrifice, the entire fruit of that sacrifice would go to the king alone. This is because he was the one who would sacrifice his wealth, which is the fruit of his work, to conduct that yajna by paying the priests and the servants involved in the work. This Danam or Karma Yoga is done by all the devotees except the three persons mentioned above. Hence, Danam is far, far greater than Jnanam or Ganam or even both put together. Jnanam and Ganam are only theoretical. They are not practical work. Due to this, Jnanam and Ganam do not come under the category of practical sacrifice of work. God only gives theoretical fruits for theoretical work done and practical fruits for practical work done, as said in the Gita, Ye yathamam prapadyante tams tathaiva bhajamyaham. The reason is that Danam, which is practical devotion, is far, far greater than Jnanam or Ganam or both put together. Many are always greater than one. Many means all of you. Many are always greater than one. One represents Datta Swami. And many is also greater than two. Two represents Devi and Padmaram. So many are greater than one and many are also greater than two. Theory certainly inspires and leads the soul to practice. But theory without practice is like a tree that does not yield any fruit. At the same time, without the tree, no fruit can appear. Hence, both theoretical and practical devotion are important. Together, they represent all the members of our spiritual association called Satsanga. It may superficially appear that all the other devotees are great, Devi and Padmaram are greater, and Datta Swami is the greatest. But it is only a superficial illusion. When all of us go to God, the scene gets reversed, by which the first becomes the last and the last becomes the first. An example, nice example Swamiji is giving. In a movie, the actor playing the role of Lord Venkateshwara is only a guest artist, while his devotee, the devotee in the movie, is the main hero. But as far as the movie is concerned, God is the greatest, and the devotee is submissive to God. However, when both the actors leave their roles and come to the office of the producer, the scene is reversed. The guest artist playing the role of Lord Venkateshwara is just paid 5 lakh rupees, while the actor playing the role of the devotee is paid 1 crore rupees. The sequence of great, greater, and the greatest is in one direction in the movie of this world, but that sequence gets completely reversed in the office of the producer God. So in the world, what appears to be great, greater, and greatest, that in front of God gets reversed. Jnanam, which is Jnana Yoga, stands for the 14th great world called Brahmaloka. Ganam, which is Bhakti Yoga, stands for the greater 15th world called Goloka. Dhanam or Karma Yoga stands for the greatest 16th world called Datta Sevaka Loka. Swamiji has previously mentioned about creating the 16th highest world called Datta Sevaka Loka for people who do practical, who participate in practical devotion, which is the sacrifice of the fruit of work and the sacrifice of work. So accordingly, Brahmaloka, Goloka, and Datta Sevaka Loka are represent these three stages of Jnana, Bhakti, and Karma, and they are great, greater, and greatest. However, we must not forget that the great God in Brahmaloka alone created the upper, greater, and greatest worlds. Meaning, God whose abode is Brahmaloka, he is the one who created the Goloka, which is greater than Brahmaloka. And he is the one who created the Datta Sevaka Loka, which is even greater than Goloka. So it is, after all, it is that God who is the great. He has created all of that. So we must remember that the two words greater and greatest have come only from the basic word great. So he is the root of all the greater as well. He is the root of everything, the entire universe. So although we are talking about the role reversal and all that, we should also keep in mind that ultimately the entire greatness comes only from God. So that completes the Sankranti message. Swamiji, shall I proceed with last time's?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Swamiji. It's a really wonderful message, Swamiji. Very wonderful. All the Sankranti messages, actually in the past you have given the three messages, they were really awesome. All together it is giving such a clear picture.
Jnanam, Ganam, Dhanam.
Yes, Swamiji. Really beautiful. So we will continue with the next. Now we are into question answers from the time that from last week. There was one question that was remaining in that same chapter. So this question was asked by Shri Veena Datta, and the question is it true that Lord Subramanya resides in us in the form of Kundalini? So he's describing his question. While discussing with a devotee, he said that Subramanya Swami is nothing but the Kundalini within us. I could correlate that with your bhajan on Lord Subramanya Swami, which says that Chaitanya Shaktiyau Kundalini Vega. Every soul possesses Chaitanya within him, but every soul cannot be Lord Subramanya. So how can we understand this? This is Veena Datta's question. So Swamiji replied, Garuda is a kite, but every kite is not Garuda. Nandi is a bull, but every bull is not Nandi. Adishesha is a serpent, but every serpent is not Adishesha. Krishna is a human being, but every human being is not Krishna. Our Prime Minister is an Indian, but every Indian is not the Prime Minister. All ores are minerals, but all minerals are not ores. All gentlemen are human beings, but all human beings are not gentlemen. I think this is sufficient to understand the concept. Kundalini or the mind is the awareness energy traveling in the form of waves like a serpent. A serpent also travels in this wave-like manner. That mind exists in every human being. Kundalini itself is not God Subramanya. Only the Kundalini present in incarnations is God Subramanya. Shri Ramana Maharshi was an incarnation of God Subramanya. The Kundalini present in Ramana Maharshi alone is God Subramanya. That completes that question. Beautiful way Swamiji has answered. So now this is the November 20th message. This was a satsang actually. These questions were asked in a satsang. So the first question. So here the names of the people are not specifically noted. Only the questions have been noted. So the first question that came up on that day was on Kartika Purnima. Why do people light 365 or 1001 lamps? So Swami replied, O learned and devoted servants of God, a person burning 1001 lamps is more ignorant and a greater sinner than the person burning 365 lamps. The oil used by the former and the oil used by the latter can instead be donated to poor people to maintain their life lamps. In that case, the former would become more meritorious than the latter. God has nothing to do with the lamps, since he is the source of even the light of the sun, moon, and stars. The Veda says, Tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. Na tatra suryo bhati na chandra tarakam. So even for the sun and the stars, the source of their illumination is God alone. So he does not require the oil lamps. Ghee and oil are precious food items, and the Veda says that food should not be destroyed. Annam na parichakshita, says the Veda. In ancient days, neither electricity nor kerosene were available, and hence oil lamps were used. It was not a sin because it was unavoidable. Even the oil lamps were used only during the night and not during the day when sunlight is available. Now the second question. This is by Shri Bhagat Konduri. He asks, what is Pativratyam and is there any mention of it in the Vedas? He further asks, why did Anasuya Mata, Goddess Lakshmi, Goddess Parvati and Sita Mata follow it? Could you please explain the importance of Pativratyam? Swamiji replied, the word Bharta in Sanskrit means the maintainer. It commonly means the husband, but more properly, it means God, the maintainer of all souls in the world. Bharya commonly means a wife, but more properly, it means the soul maintained by God. Sometimes a particular Bharta may happen to be a husband as well as God. In that case, that person is an incarnation. And in that case, a distinction between the two is not possible. In the ancient tradition, the husband maintained the wife, and that is why the husband was called the Bharta. But God is the actual Bharta or husband of all souls, irrespective of the gender of the souls. In pravritti or worldly life, since the husband maintains the wife should be grateful to the husband, and so Pativratyam, which is the wife's devotion to the husband, has some meaning. But in nivritti, God alone is the Bharta of all souls, and he is to be given the topmost importance by every soul, be it male or female. So we move further to the questions answered on November 23rd. So this is a question by Shri Pawan. How can I attain satisfaction in spiritual life and worldly life? So his detailed question is, Dear Swami, there are two paths for every soul, spiritual and materialistic. In both paths, there are people identified to be the best and they are given due recognition. While I am trying my best, I am yet to get due recognition. This craving for recognition in both the paths is due to a couple of reasons. One, knowing Shri Dattatreya Swami in this birth. Two, having a Sadguru in this birth. If not now, then I am not sure if I will get a chance again. So there is a need to hurry up, and that too immediately. The point here is that I am comparing myself with others. Except in a positive degree where I have a straight and non-disturbing union with God or sadhus or rishis, both comparative degree and superlative degree will depress me, being an average person in the spiritual path. Also, being a Rajarshi, Rishi, Maharshi, sage Vishwamitra was always comparing himself with Brahmarshi Vasishtha until he attained Brahmajnana. which is the positive degree, by doing thousands of years of tapas. Apart from this, I have observed that all the best efforts that I put for my worldly welfare in my materialistic life do not yield the best of results based on the theory of karma. So I am not in a satisfied state in both the paths. I am trying to mask my dissatisfaction, stating that I am satisfied. This line is faulty as I am trying to crush my desire, but I do not have an option to keep myself satisfied. This is leading to depression, as I do not see success anywhere in sight. This is not sthita prajnata. Kindly enlighten me on this, Swami. So Swami replied, O learned and devoted servants of God, the ultimate aim of human life is to get the maximum grace of God. This single aim is called nivrutti. It is like constructing a huge building of salvation. Before the construction of such a building, a strong foundation is essential. That foundation is called pravritti or worldly life. Unless you have stabilized the foundation or pravritti, you cannot think of nivrutti or spiritual life. Pravritti is the fundamental foundation of nivrutti, and it becomes the foremost part of nivrutti. Pravritti means getting a good job, for which you have to concentrate on professional education. This gives you a livelihood and other basic comforts. In these days of unemployment and devaluation of money, it is not wrong to aspire for an employed life partner. We have to follow the surrounding atmosphere for pravritti. Having a life partner and children is necessary to have some mental peace and stability in life. But we should not forget that pravritti is only a part of nivritti. Pravritti without the aim of nivritti is just like the waste of sugarcane after all its juice has been squeezed out of it. Pravritti has no meaning without nivritti. But for nivritti, pravritti is the essential foundation. Some people are constantly involved in the construction of the foundation alone, without even a trace of the construction of the nivritti palace. Such people are always to be sympathized for the climax of their misfortune. Most people build the pravritti foundation in a very strong way. But instead of building a very strong nivritti palace on top of it, they put up a small hut made of bamboo on the steel and concrete foundation. For them, the foundation is not meant to support the upper nivritti palace. Instead, the upper hut is put up only to protect the lower foundation. Comparison with others done in the right direction is good for progressing on the spiritual path. But one must only seek progress on the spiritual path. There is no need to seek any progress on the worldly path once the basic necessities are fulfilled. Beyond that, any further progress in pravritti has no meaning. It only gives self-satisfaction, and that too in an unnecessary field. Beyond the limits of what is expected, progress in pravritti is harmful in several ways, and it ends up in misery alone. Once the basic foundation is completed with full satisfaction, one should always be anxious about the construction of the nivritti palace on that foundation. The construction of that nivritti palace can go up to any height. If you are thus committed to nivritti, God will take care of your pravritti, and you need not worry about it in any way. You must concentrate on nivritti, especially in the service of God, without aspiring for anything in return. Pravritti is highly temporary and is limited to this momentary life alone, whereas nivritti is eternal, and its fruit follows the soul for many lives in the future. Have full confidence that God will take care of your pravritti, which in excess is dangerous and will only bring lot of misery. You must pray to God that He may grant pravritti to the extent that it is more than sufficient for you, but not excessive, so that it does not bring any unnecessary misery upon you. Nivritti will build such confidence in you, and not this progress of endless pravritti. God has promised in the Gita that His devotee will never be destroyed. Name bhakta pranashyati. Both pravritti and nivritti without the grace of God sorry, in both pravrutti and nivrutti, without the grace of God, your efforts are only writings on water. Meaning they will get erased immediately, instantly. They are very temporary. This pravrutti is nothing, is just nothing compared to the eternal nivrutti. Wonderful. Such a powerful message. This next question is by Srimati Anita Kuntla. The question is, if the Gayatri mantra does not worship goddess Gayatri, why is there a temple of goddess Gayatri? The detailed question is as follows. Jai Guru Datta, Pada Namaskaram Swami. This is regarding the Gayatri mantra, which is to be repeatedly chanted. You have said that there is no deity called Ma Gayatri. But there is a goddess Gayatri temple in Ahmedabad, which was built for the spiritual awakening of people by Sri Ram Sharma. I had a vision of the deity which is single-headed. I also had a darshanam of the 5-headed Gayatri deity in Hyderabad. Please clear my doubt, Swami. Whose deities are these then? So Swami replied, building a temple for Gayatri does not establish the true concept of Gayatri. Somebody has introduced a prayer on Gayatri which is composed in a worldly meter called Shardula Vikriditam. This is not a Vedic meter, it is a more modern meter. It is the verse is Mukta Vidruma. The meter is, as I said, the meter is not a Vedic meter. Gayatri is just the name of the Vedic meter in which the original verse, that is Tat Saviturvarenyam, that original mantra, which is known as the Gayatri mantra. So that is in the meter called Gayatri, and that Gayatri is a Vedic meter. The deity worship through that verse is only God Brahma Datta, meaning it is Lord Brahma, Savita. This is evident since while doing the daily worship called Sandhya Vandanam, we recite Gayatri Chandaha Savita Devata Paramatma Swarupam. The verse Tatsavat Viturvarenyam and so on, which is thought to be the Gayatri mantra, speaks about God Brahma, who is referred to as Savita, the creator of the universe, and who illuminates our intelligence through the preaching of divine spiritual knowledge. So we are praying to him. Swamiji has very beautifully given that meaning of the entire Gayatri mantra. It is extraordinary, that meaning. At least my sincere request is everybody should memorize that. It is so beautiful. The next question is again by Srimati Anita ji. How can I find inaction in action and action in inaction? So the detailed question is, I read in a discourse in which the Lord himself said that one should find action in inaction and inaction in action in some places. This was instructed by Lord Krishna to Arjuna for the noble cause of establishing justice. How can this concept of inaction and inaction be correlated in human life at your lotus feet? So Swami replied, when an intention exists, even the inaction becomes action. Intention itself is a theoretical action. Even for the intention, there is a punishment, here as well as in hell. If the intention does not exist, naturally there should not be any action. But sometimes action still has to be done by some force. Such an action can be treated as inaction. When there is intention to kill somebody, there is theoretical punishment, which is that you will be warned severely either here or in hell. Sometimes one has the intention to kill somebody. The person makes others kill that somebody. In that case, the person is punished more severely than the actual person who directly killed the victim. So basically, we see many in movies also. We see, there is some very important person and he wants somebody to be killed, so he hires a hitman to kill. So in that case, the person who gave the order to kill, who had the original intention to kill, he will be punished more That is what Swamiji is saying. When you are walking on the road, some ants may be killed under your feet. And in such sinful action, there is no punishment, since the intention to kill is absent. A ship sailing at sea at a very long distance will appear to be standstill by a person seeing it from the seashore. Sometimes when you are sitting in a stationary train, you feel that your train is moving, while actually the train next to your train is moving. Both these are practical examples for inaction in action and action in inaction. Little bit of tongue twisters. The next question is by Tinku K. The question is, who is Jyeshtha Devi and what actions invoke her? So the answer is, Swami replied, if one steals money of a good person, Jyeshtha Devi, who is personified poverty, will come and stay in the house. Sudama stole the share of food of Krishna and got severe poverty. The next question is by Kanika Mankotia. The question is, if I am being harassed by someone, should I retaliate or remain quiet? The detailed question is, if an innocent woman is unjustly troubled and harmed by jealous, insecure women who are literally on an ego trip to put her down because of their own maya, because their own maya makes them think that she, the devotee, is a liar or an arrogant person, when in fact the person is innocent and earnest. What must the person do with all that junk and abuse that has robbed her of her human dignity at the demonic egoist mindsets of plotting, planning, scheming, and manipulative women who have no faith in God but claim to have and know it all? Should one not even write, express, and channel out one's rage? Or should one simply keep quiet like a saintly puppet, especially when one realizes that others were out on an ego trip, out to belittle and put others down to gain importance and a sense of superiority? How does ignoring such pathetic behavior help our dharma? Should the devotee pray to God to be avenged? Why must one act like nothing has happened? Is that healthy for mental health, to pretend to be a false sage and forgive such people when in truth they were enjoying harming an innocent person? Where is dharma? Would such people be given a free license if they are not given a divine chalan by the devotee through an earnest call to the divine avenger? Gratitude, namaste. Swami replied, the omniscient God knows everything and will take the proper action in proper time, because God is omnipotent, unlike us. But you think of the possibility of the same behavior exhibited by you to some innocent person in your life, or the possibility of your behavior towards the same sinful women who might have been innocent in their previous births. If one of these two cases is true, God will not punish them, because your pain is the punishment given to you. If neither of the above two cases is true, God will punish them very severely in proper time. God gives some time to the sinner to reform, and if the sinner is not reformed, the sinner will receive 100 times more punishment. But in any case, you are expected to live without thinking of revenge. If you boil with revenge, while punishing the sinners, God will also punish you for your vengeful thoughts. If you remain patient under all circumstances, you will be compensated with some suitable reward, indicating His grace on you. It is your choice to get a reward from God by keeping your patience, or get another punishment for your unnecessary vengeful thoughts. Draupadi was insulted by the Kauravas, but Draupadi had also insulted the Kauravas orally. Even then, the insult caused by the Kauravas to Draupadi was extremely severe, and hence Krishna decided to punish the Kauravas with death. Draupadi could have been patient without vengeful thoughts, but Draupadi was always boiling with revenge, and hence Draupadi was also punished in that all her sons were killed after the battle. Even though the entire kingdom was given to the Pandavas by Krishna, no son of Draupadi remained to become the king of that entire kingdom won in the war. The next question is by Amudha. Can you please confirm the miraculous experience I recently had from you? She describes in detail. Dear Swami, recently I had a miraculous experience from you and the Mother of Earth. I believe it, but I am looking for your confirmation about it. I am sorry, Swami, if this question is invalid. On your divine feet, your servant Amudha. Swami replied, if you really feel that God Datta existing in me has done that miracle, I confirm that miracle. The decision in this matter has to be taken by you alone. Now the next questions are from July 10th. This question is by Shri Bhagat. And the question is, instead of analyzing creation, is it not better to befriend the creator and enjoy the fruits of creation? So the detailed question, it's a very interesting question and a very interesting answer by Swamiji. Most unexpected, actually. So Bhagat ji asks, Jai Guru Datta, could you please explain the essence of the story? And the name of the story is Count Not the Leaves, Eat the Mangoes. This is the small story that Mr. Bhagat is sharing. So the story goes like this. Two friends went to an orchard. One of them, possessing much worldly wisdom, immediately began to count the mango trees there, the number of leaves and the mangoes on each tree, to estimate what might be the approximate value of the whole orchard. His companion, however, went to the owner, made friends with him, and then quietly going to a tree, began, at his host's desire, to pluck the fruit and eat. Whom do you consider to be the wiser of the two? So the moral of the story is, eat the mangoes, it will satisfy your hunger. What good is counting the trees and the leaves and making calculations? The vain man of intellect busies himself uselessly with finding out the why and the wherefore of creation, while the humble man of wisdom makes friends with the Creator and enjoys his gift of supreme bliss. So this is the moral of the story. So Bhagat ji is asking Swamiji to comment on that. So Swami replied, O learned and devoted servants of God, there are two types of owners of mango gardens. The first one is the intelligent owner who recognizes that you have actually come for the mangoes and not to make friends with him. The second type is the dull owner who cannot recognize your intention of getting to the mangoes and who, believing your words of false friendship, gives you the mangoes. If you play your trick very cleverly, even the first type of owner might become the second type of owner before you and give you the mangoes. In other words, even if the owner is very intelligent, if you are even more intelligent, you might be able to cheat that fellow also. But God does not come under the category of these two owners. No matter how intelligent and talented you are, even before you open your mouth, God knows that you have come for the sake of the mangoes and not for the sake of developing friendship with him. Hence, your suggestion becomes totally invalid in the case of God. If you go to God for real friendship, without having an eye on the mangoes, God will become your friend. And he will also give you mangoes, more than what you need. There is no point in wasting time trying to build such a false friendship with God, because which does not even have a trace of true friendship. Instead, it is better to do some work in that time and earn money. Then with your hard-earned money, you can purchase mangoes from a fruit shop. In this respect, the atheist is far better than the theist who worships God for the fulfillment of his desires. Beautiful, really beautiful. The way Swamiji has answered, one would think reading that story that Swamiji is going to take the side of the intelligent person who made friends with the creator, but beautiful. The aspiration, being aspiration free, is most important. That point is being brought out in this. This next question is by Shri Mattapalli Bharat, and he asks, Swami, why I am getting many odd dreams, including those of snakes and Lord Shiva and Parvati for the past few months. Why is it so? So he's describing, Swamiji, I don't know how to start this, so let me come to the point. I do not know how you will take this, but seriously, I am literally getting confused with how to deal with it. For the past 3 months, I have been having numerous dreams. I will describe them and I request you to explain why I am having such dreams. In the beginning, I would repeatedly see dreams about snakes and cobras. After a few days, they stopped. Later, I had a dream of a devil who had held my uncle's neck in a tight grip, after which the dream suddenly ended. On the same day, in continuation with that dream, I had another dream about Lord Shiva and Parvati who came riding a motorbike to my grandmother's home. The entire dream took place near my grandmother's home. Next, I had Lord Balaji's darshanam on the sacred Tirumala hill. I woke up suddenly from the dream and prayed to Lord Balaji in my mind. A few days later, on the Tirumala hill, I saw the idol of Lord Ayyappa Swami and the Gopuram of Lord Balaji side by side, and I prayed to them. Yesterday night, I dreamt of snakes. I saw 2 old snakes lying on the road facing me. As my friend and I were passing them along the road, I was chanting Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. I passed the first snake, but the second snake flew in the air and touched my forehead. I am sure it did not bite, but I strongly felt its touch on my forehead as I continued chanting Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Even now, while writing this, I can feel the snake's touch on my forehead, exactly in the middle. I have tried to explain my dreams briefly, although it is really difficult to explain. Could you please tell me why I am having such dreams? Swami replied, when a soul is traveling with one leg placed in the boat of materialism and the other in the boat of spirituality, the soul gets such mixed dreams of worldly affairs and devotion. You need not worry much about these dreams. Instead, you must concentrate on God. Worship God Subramanya and God Hanuman. You will get rid of the tension caused by the dreams. You will get some relief from Dasara onwards, which is the festival of the Divine Mother. The next question is by Bharat Krishna. Even though God is beyond our understanding, can we at least understand the highest devotee of God? He describes his question further, saying, Namah Shivaya Swamiji, I understand that there is no way I can understand you, the unimaginable God. I can only understand how God interacts with the world, but can never understand God himself. Now my question is, if there is a devotee like Radha existing today, who is at the climax of devotion towards God, is it possible to understand such a devotee at least? So Swami replied, the original absolute God is unimaginable because he is beyond the 3-dimensional space to which our thinking and imagination is limited. The Veda says that God created space before creating the rest of creation. Atmana Akasha Sambhutaha. If the 3 spatial coordinates of length, width and height existed in God, it would mean that space already existed in God. If space had existed in God, you could not have said that God created space. Creation means producing something which did not exist before its production. When space is absent in God, God has no volume. Any item having no volume is beyond imagination. Nobody can imagine it even on trying for millions of births. Hence, God is unimaginable to our brains, which are limited to the 3-dimensional space. But the same unimaginable God also enters into a medium to become an incarnation. The medium, which is a part of the imaginable world, can either be the body of an angel, which is made of energy, or it can be a human body, which is made of a combination of matter and energy. Thus, God can either become an energetic incarnation or a human incarnation. This mediated God, which is God in a medium, can not only be imagined, but we can also see, talk, touch, and live together with him. The Gita says that God enters into the medium of a specific human being to become a human incarnation for fulfilling the desire of his intense devotees, Manushim Tanumashritam. These are the devotees who want to see and talk to him. God Datta, God Brahma, God Vishnu, God Shiva, etc. are energetic incarnations since they possess energetic bodies which are invisible to human beings, but they are imaginable. These energetic incarnations may make themselves visible to human beings for a short time if the human devotee has done a lot of penance to see God in that energetic medium. But the human incarnation is imaginable and visible to everyone, so that devotees can easily approach him without any effort. We can infer the existence of the unimaginable God in any energetic or human incarnation of God through the unimaginable actions called miracles which are performed by them. The invisible unimaginable God is the only real source of those visible unimaginable events called miracles. The perception of the absolute God is impossible, whereas the perception of the mediated God is possible. There is no difference between the energetic and human incarnations because the same unimaginable God exists in both. There is no difference between the human incarnation Krishna and energetic incarnations like God Vishnu or God Datta. Radha was also a human incarnation of God Shiva. Generally, human incarnations behave as devotees so that human devotees may not identify them as God. If undeserving devotees identify human incarnations, they may press the incarnations to grant boons to them. This is one of the main reasons why incarnations try to hide their identity. Moreover, if the human incarnation says that he or she is only a devotee, it greatly reduces the inevitable ego and jealousy that human devotees have towards the fellow human beings, including the human form of God. This helps the devotees because it allows them to approach the incarnation freely and closely to clarify their doubts without any reservation. A devotee who keeps God in the heart is a dualistic human incarnation like Hanuman and Balarama. A devotee in whom God has entered and merged is a monastic incarnation like Rama and Krishna. Any soul can become an incarnation only by the wish of God. If a soul aspires to attain the status of God, that aspiration and the effort made by the soul in that direction itself becomes the biggest disqualification for becoming an incarnation of God. The next question is again by Bharat. How is one's life partner helpful in attaining salvation? The detailed question is as follows. I have heard this verse, Dharmecha, Arthecha, Kamecha, Mokshecha. The verse is explained to every couple who is getting married, and it means that the husband and the wife cooperate with each other in matters of righteous activities, financial matters, in matters of love, and in their spiritual effort to attain liberation. I understand how a life partner can help in the first three aspects, but not on the fourth one, which is attaining liberation. Moksha means liberation from worldly bonds. How can developing a bond with the life partner help us in giving up all worldly bonds, which is moksha? Moksha is liberation from worldly bonds. So how can the bond with the life partner help us in giving up the worldly bonds? This seems contradictory. Kindly explain this to me, Swami. Padabhivandanam, Sri Datta Swami, your devotee Bharat Krishna. So Swami replied, hello, yeah, thank you. Swami replied, Performing religious rituals is called dharma. Earning for the welfare of the family is called artha. Pacifying the biological need for sex is called kama. Moksha means liberation or salvation, and it refers to the spiritual path of knowledge and devotion to God, which leads to the liberation from worldly miseries and tensions. For a man, his wife is not a hindrance in attaining moksha or liberation. She is also a soul present in a human body, just like him. Saint Sureshwara kept his wife with him even after accepting sainthood or sannyasa. His guru, Shankaracharya, encouraged it. A saint stays with his guru. The guru is also a soul embedded in a human body, just like the wife. I do not understand why the wife is considered to be a hindrance. She can help the man by preparing food for him and serving him in other ways to maintain good health. After retirement from one's job, one should take up Vanaprastha ashrama to learn spiritual knowledge. After Vanaprastha, one should take up sannyasa as per the tradition of Kramamukti, which is the gradual progress towards salvation and which is recommended for all souls. In old age, the desire for sex, kama, also vanishes. The wife helps the saint by serving him in several ways, especially by preparing hygienic food, which is very, very essential in old age to maintain good health. If the saint's health is spoiled, he cannot even perform his duty of propagating spiritual knowledge in the world. So it is the biggest foolishness to think that marriage is a hindrance to the spiritual path. Shankara was an incarnation of God Shiva, and he wanted to finish his spiritual work at a very early age. Hence, he did not marry. But God Shiva, who is the source of Shankara, married twice. Even Hanuman got married because his departed ancestors appeared before him and told him that unless he got married, it was not possible to attain salvation. In Vanaprastha itself, the wife is looked upon as one's own sister. In sannyasa, one's wife is certainly looked upon as a fellow devotee, also trying to attain salvation. The saint lives along with other fellow devotees too. Tulsidas told Meera that females were forbidden from staying in his ashrama. Then Meera told him that God alone is male, Purusha, and that all the souls, irrespective of whether they are embedded in male or female bodies, are actually only females. They are Prakruti. Purusha means the God who is male, and Prakruti is feminine, which includes all the souls. So Tulsidas realized the truth and fell at the feet of Meera for his erroneous thought. Now this is the following are the questions on 13th of July. This question is by Nayoman Gunadarshana from Bali. He sent his question through Shri Phani. The question is, what is the aim of God and Mother Nature with regard to this coronavirus and the death of thousands of pigs in Bali? Swami replied, O learned and devoted servants of God, coronaviruses have existed in bats for a long time. They have only recently found to spread rapidly in human beings. In most cases, the medicines used for cold, cough, fever, etc. can be used to treat it. Death usually happens when the lungs get damaged. However, there are also many people who are positive, which is infected, but they are asymptomatic, meaning they don't have any symptoms. These people are a major cause for the spread of the infection. Then there are also cases of people who have symptoms that are very similar to the coronavirus, which is your COVID-19 infection, but are not actually infected. They are symptomatic negative, meaning they show the symptoms, show similar symptoms, but they are actually not infected by COVID-19. Some such people also die due to the fear that they have been infected. In any case, more powerful viruses like the G4 virus are waiting to join the duty of delivering the fruits of the sins of mankind. But one need not fear at all. The various precautions that are being advised now are not very new. They were also advised since ancient times, and they included staying as far as possible from a patient suffering with symptoms. Even if this coronavirus is eradicated, does it mean that death will end forever? There are millions of ways for the deity of justice, Mrityu Devata, to implement death for human beings. Such dangerous episodes of destruction of humanity take place due to the growth of sin in society, which we see happening day by day. The Gita says that there are three main types of sins. The first one is illegitimate sex, kama. The second is illegitimate anger and violence, which is krodha. And the third is illegitimate greed leading to corruption, which is lobha. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Trividham narakasyedam dwaram nashanam atmanah. These are the three gateways to hell, he says. If the soul takes an oath before God to try his or her level best to exercise self-control and avoid these three main gates of sin, that soul will be safe in the hands of God. The only reason for the stress faced by people is the sins committed by them. This is a very important statement Swamiji is giving. The spiritual preachers are neglecting this main point. Instead, they are preaching about ways of controlling the mind to relieve stress like psychiatrists. Without eliminating the main cause of stress, merely focusing on psychological methods to control stress will never solve the problem. It is just like applying wet cloth on the forehead to control fever without using antibiotics to kill the bacteria, which are the main cause of the fever. The next question by an unknown devotee is, what sadhana should I do for progressing in my material and spiritual life? Swami replied, practical devotion alone gives the fruit, which is pleasing God and attaining His grace. Knowledge and devotion are theory, which is also essential because practice is generated only from theory. Knowledge is like water, devotion is like manure, and practice is like the mango plant. Only the mango tree bears the mango fruit. No mango fruit will appear from the water alone, even if you have hundreds of water tanks. No mango fruit will appear from the manure alone, even if you have hundreds of bags of manure. But water is also essential, and without it, the mango plant dies. Similarly, manure is also essential, and without it, the mango plant will not grow into a mango tree to bear fruit. Theory should thus generate and promote practice. Practice is karma yoga, which consists of 1. Karma sannyasa, which means doing service. It is the sacrifice of one's work. The second is karma phala tyaga, which means sacrificing or offering money, which is the fruit of one's hard work. It is the karma phala tyaga. Karma yoga is the tree of practical sacrifice, which alone yields the fruit of the grace of God. Spiritual knowledge or jnana yoga is the water and devotion to God, or bhakti yoga. Sorry. Spiritual knowledge or jnana yoga is the water, and devotion to God or bhakti yoga is the manure. Jnana is the water, bhakti is the manure. Both help the plant of practice survive and grow. Water allows the plant to survive, and the manure allows it to grow. So jnana allows the plant to survive, and bhakti allows it to grow. One's intellect must be full of sharp spiritual knowledge, which gives correct direction to the spiritual effort. One's mind must be full of devotion, which provides the force to convert the theory into practice. But ultimately, one must be involved in practice, which gives the ultimate fruit. The practice includes both practical service by offering one's hard work as well as the practical sacrifice uh, of money, which is offering the fruit of one's hard work. Both these have to be offered in the divine uh, project of God on earth. So when God comes down on earth, it has to be offered to the contemporary human incarnation to carry out his work. God's divine project on earth is the propagation of divine spiritual knowledge to uplift humanity. When the devotee's spiritual effort is thus complete with spiritual knowledge, devotion, service, and sacrifice, it pleases God immensely. This is the essence of the spiritual effort of any devotee. The next question is by Kumari Trailokya. She asks, does the incarnation also feel worldly stress? The detailed question is, Pada Namaskaram Swami, my doubt written below may reflect my jealousy towards the human incarnation, but I sincerely want to follow you. Recently, I applied for a job which had 3 rounds of selection. Before attending every round, I felt stressed. I wish I knew the future. If I had known the future, I would not have been so stressed. I could have just prepared calmly without any mental tension. But I learnt from our Nikhil sir that you also make the same sort of efforts like us ordinary souls in your daily life. You have explained that the human incarnation of God is a 2-component system consisting of the soul in a medium and God. I fully believe that the omniscient God is within you and he knows the future. So does God tell you about the future? Do you feel any tension like us? Did Hanuman, who was also an incarnation, already know that he was going to burn Ravana's Lanka? Did the soul of Lord Rama know the whereabouts of Sita before meeting Jatayu? At your feet, Trailokya. Swami replied, the human incarnation is perfectly God because the original absolute unimaginable God or Parabrahman has merged with the human being, which is the medium. The human incarnation is a homogeneous mixture of 2 components, namely the God component and the human component. Since the merging between the two is perfect, the uh, uh, resulting in a single phase, all the powers of God are also present with the merged human being. But the final decision in any matter depends on the God component and not on the human being component. If God does not wish, the mouth of the human being component will remain shut and the human being will not be able to speak anything, even if it wants to speak. If you take a piece of charcoal and set it on fire, the charcoal too appears red in color. The red color is characteristic of the fire. The original black color of the charcoal disappears. On the other hand, when electric current passes through a metallic wire, the properties of the wire like the leanness, the color of the metallic wire, etc. do not disappear. The electrified wire appears just like a non-electrified wire externally. If God wishes to express his divinity, the human being component acts like a piece of ignited charcoal. But if God wants to hide himself from the human being component, if God wants to hide himself, the human being component acts like the electrified metallic wire. In other words, the divinity is not externally visible. So if God wishes to show his divinity externally, then the human incarnation appears to be divine even externally. But if God wishes to hide, then externally the divinity is not seen. Although it is there, it's very much there, but we cannot directly see it. We will come to know through the prajnanam or through the miracles, we will be able to infer, but directly you may not be able to see it. In other words, the human incarnation appears just like an ordinary human being externally, which is the case of the wire, the electrified wire. Both these types of behavior are essential for the human being to carry out its planned divine program on earth properly and smoothly. Knowing the future has both merits and defects. The main merit is that one can avoid tension. The main defect is that there is no thrill in life if you know the future. It is like watching a movie when you already know the entire story. The merit is that you will have peace, and the defect is that you will not get any enjoyment, since all the thrill in life is lost. The best thing is to totally surrender to God and live life facing every situation with the feeling that whatever is given to us by God is for our own welfare. Sometimes a certain problem creates tension in our mind, but the same problem will do good to us later. Sometimes a benefit brings immediate happiness, but the same benefit might harm us in the future. The enjoyment of both tension and happiness side by side is like eating meals consisting of both hot and sweet dishes, which are eaten alternately. God enjoys this creation in this way so that he always enjoys and remains entertained. This is bliss. Bliss is continuous happiness or ananda. Asamantat sarvakalam nandati iti. The ananda, the a prefix refers to asamantat, continuously, sarvakalam nandati, being happy for forever, without a break. Bliss does not mean excessive happiness, which might cause a heart attack leading to death. So bliss refers to the continuity of that happiness through enjoyment of both the happy and the sad moments. God creates, maintains, and destroys this world with these three things. Oh, sorry. God creates, maintains, and destroys this world, and these three things are not possible for the soul. Jagat Vyapara Varjam. The Brahma Sutras say that these cosmic transactions, three cosmic transactions, which is creation of the world, maintenance or ruling of the world, and destruction of the world. These three cosmic transactions are not possible for the soul. Jagat Vyapara Varjam. It is banned. It's not possible. God wanted souls to at least enjoy the world of alternate happiness and tension, similar to the way he enjoys the world. So creating and those cosmic transactions are not possible for us, but at least we can try to enjoy as God, we can achieve that godly status in the equal enjoyment. That is what God wishes. So God wanted the souls to at least enjoy this world of alternate happiness and tension, similar to the way that he enjoys the world. But souls are unable to even enjoy the world like God. Yet they claim to be God already. The reality is that it is highly impossible for the soul to become God. The master purchased all the food ingredients, expertly cooked the food containing both sweet and hot dishes, and has served the food in 2 plates. He has asked the servant to sit along with him and enjoy the meal together. The poor servant, while eating the food, is unable to derive continuous enjoyment like the master. The servant smiles while eating sweet dishes, but he weeps while eating the hot dishes. When simply enjoying the meal like the master is impossible for the servant, purchasing all the food ingredients and expertly cooking the meal like the master is doubly impossible. So do you find even the slightest possibility of the soul becoming God with its own effort? Swamiji, it is 9:23, Swamiji.
Okay, we can.
Shall I pause for questions or?
Ask. Ask the question.
Yes, Swamiji.
Now, everyone who has questions can ask now. It will be recorded and sent to Swami.
Namaskara, Swamiji. This is Ganesh. Swamiji, a few days back, I was discussing with Nikhil sir. I asked him a question. The soul is also very unimaginable to us. We cannot how a soul looks like. We cannot imagine how it is. And when you go deep into a particular object, while analyzing it, you almost touch the unimaginable plane because you reach the limits of your imagination. So, what prevents me from thinking that the unimaginable God is not present within the soul, because when you try to analyze the soul, it is almost as unimaginable. That's my question, Swamiji.
Recorded. It is recorded. I
Uh,
will tell you.
Swamiji means the discussion we were having is like, if you go to any object, it is made out of atoms. If you go deeper into the atoms, then finally all the subatomic particles, then you reach a point beyond which you cannot imagine. So basically, that unimaginability is found in you touch create any point of creation. If you go deep in it, you will reach that unimaginability. So Ganesh's question is, even if I touch the soul and I ask deeper questions, I will reach unimaginability. That is his expectation.
There is a difference between unimaginable plane and a plane which is unimaginable because it is difficult to imagine today.
Yes.
I may imagine that plane, but
Correct.
today it is difficult. That is one plane. Another plane is forever it is unimaginable. So that forever unimaginable is God, and difficult to imagine, but on long time, after taking some time or after doing a lot of effort and a lot of thinking, one can imagine this soul. So there is a difference between totally unimaginable. You see, I may jump and I may touch the upper part of the door by high jump, but I can never jump and touch the sky.
Yes.
Sky is God, whereas the upper portion of the door is soul. So I will describe. I will explain that.
Excellent point, Swami.
When I give the
Okay,
answer,
Swami.
I will.
Yes.
Okay. Next question.
Hello, Sudharani Garu, you can ask your question if you are there.
Bharat, if you recall those questions which were being discussed on the group, you can explain those questions. Over the week, there were many discussions in the online group, so those points actually were being recorded.
You can ask.
Swami, one point of discussion was, I said this statement. I am Bharat Krishna. I said this statement that whatever good I am doing is due to the grace of God, and whatever bad is happening, if by mistake, is definitely it's my mistake. It's not God's mistake. And then Lakshman Garu pointed out that it is even better to say that whatever good is happening, it is because of Swami, and whatever is bad is happening, it's because of Saul. So the second statement is better than the first one. And the discussion about it was happening. It will be good if you share your opinion about that too.
It can be recorded as a question.
Yes. Swami.
And if during the week when you are discussing some points were there, you were telling those points also you can questions, record them. I will answer.
Okay.
Even if they are not.
Understood, sir. Thanks, Swami. Okay, Swami.
In course of time, I mean before the next week, I will answer those points also.
Thank you, Swami. Thank you very much, Swami. Yes, Swami.
Swamiji, this Sudharani Garu's question is here. What she is asking is, spirituality standards of ancient Indians was uncomparable to present generations. In the divine discourses, it is stressed that those days people lacked scientific logic and they could not study the characteristics of space and so on, which is that Shabda Guna Akasha. I think she's referring to that point. What I feel is that the science and technology in those days was at a very great height. And because they made unique architecture, number of temples, and many other things, materials, material science, and many other things they had. Then she is asking, why have you disqualified the excellent science of those days? Then second question, I think Swamiji has been muted.
Hello, muted.
Yes. Now it's okay. Then second question she's asking is, why did that extraordinary knowledge fail to reach to the next generations, and why is it completely extinct now? Why did we miss the blessing of God in this regard? Then the third one she is asking is, why is our ignorance so condensed that we cannot understand what exactly the message of the builder through that excellent monument? What was the exact? Okay, I have not properly understood the question. But she's saying, I think she's referring to the architectural monuments that the ancient Indians had. So we could not understand that. Why is our ignorance so condensed? Then the last question she has is, will Indians regain that past glory irrespective of many current disputes? These are all Sudharani Garu's questions.
You record, I will answer.
Do we have any other questions?
I think that's all for today, sir. We can go ahead to
Mahima. Ajay Garu.
నమస్కారం స్వామి.
నమస్తే.
మహిమ ఏమన్నా కంటిన్యూ చేస్తాను
Ah.
ఇన్ కంటిన్యూషన్ టు ది ఎర్లియర్ సత్సంగ్ ఇన్ మహిమ యమున. నెక్స్ట్ మహిమ, గివింగ్ విజన్ ఆఫ్ పవర్ ఆఫ్ దత్త. Am I audible, Swami?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Swami went to the house of Sri Seshadri Garu, a famous auditor in Vijayawada, and also is the auditor of two spiritual trusts, Sri Datta Gnana Prachara Parishad and Sri Datta Seva Samiti of Swami, doing free service to Lord Datta. Swami did satsang in their house. Srimati Lalita, his wife, and Ramya, his daughter, touched feet of Swami in the end. Srimati Lalita experienced an intensive electric shock. Ramya saw various colors and rings of light energy emitted by Swami. All the devotees shared their experience and became very happy. Swami explained, the energetic form of God, along with unimaginable God, merges with the human body of human incarnation. All these rays, colors, and electric shocks are only the properties of energetic medium of God that merged with the human body of human incarnation. Such expressions or miracles are unimaginable events of the root source, the unimaginable God. The energy is imaginable, but the expression of the energy is unimaginable. Thus, both energetic form and unimaginable God express their native effects respectively. Next, Mahima, giving vision as Lord Krishna. My mother thought all the visions as only some illusions of eyes. On one Krishnastami festival, Swami was made to sit in a chair and was worshipped by devotees. Suddenly, my mother saw Swami as Lord Krishna with flute in hands, crossing his both legs. My mother was shocked and was almost in the stage of getting heart attack. Swami placed his hand on the head of my mother, and my mother immediately attained normalcy. Swami asked my mother, is this vision also an eye illusion? My mother repented for her misunderstanding the visions. Srimati Padmavati saw Swami as Krishna, a small child, in her house. She became very emotional and gave food to Swami with her own hands. Swami visited her house for 5 days, doing satsang in her house. On the last day, Swami appeared as Lord Krishna, holding flute in his hand, with golden crown and peacock feather on it, and with three shining vertical lines as mark on forehead. She shed tears continuously. Swami was named as Venugopala Krishnamurti in his seventh year by the villagers in his native village. The reason were naming ritual of Swami in the childhood was avoided since 7 boys before Swami died in the joint paternal family who were killed by black magic of two devilish experts in black magic along with several villagers. Swami was the eighth child, and both bad people were killed on the birthday of Swami. Swami explained, I gave the vision to mother of Fani to remove her doubt about visions. An eye illusion can't give such serious effect and intensive experience. Srimati Padmavati was the mother of my elder brother Balarama in the past birth, and her name was Rohini. In view of that bond, she got the vision due to her unassuming maternal love shown on me in the previous birth. Next Mahima. Giving vision of frightening Bhadrakali. On one night, Swami slept in the house of Sitamma at Mangalgiri. Sitamma and her family members slept in the hall, whereas Swami slept in a room in that night. In the midnight, Sitamma awoke suddenly and heard loud voice of Swami from room. She went outside the house and looked into the room by pushing the door of the window. She was very much shocked to see Swami talking with very frightening divine form called as Bhadrakali, who was with several golden jewels and black sari. The conversation between Swami and her was in Sanskrit language. Sitamma could not understand it and went silently into the hall to sleep. Next day, she revealed this vision to other devotees, and all devotees approached Swami to know that conversation in Sanskrit. Swami told that she asked him to give permission to kill all the human beings in very fast way through the disease called Mahamari, which is nothing but AIDS. Swami told her that the time has not yet come and that she has to wait for some more time to see whether people get realization through spiritual knowledge or not. Swami explained, illegal sex is one of the three main gates to hell, as said in the Gita. Realization will come either through knowledge or at least temporary realization through fear. The second way chosen by God was this disease. Sin has to be controlled permanently by soft way, sama, or at least temporarily by harsh way, danda, in pravrutti. Next one. Giving vision to baby called Susmita. Susmita is the baby of Srimati Padma, who is very sincere devotee of Swami. She started going to Badrinath on pilgrimage along with her husband and baby Susmita. She touched the feet of Swami, requesting him to be with them in the journey for protection. Swami nodded his head positively. They completed pilgrimage and returned safely. They came to Swami to thank for his protection given to them. Swami asked the baby, did you not see me moving by the side of bus, through the window of bus, climbing the hill? You smiled, and in return, I also smiled. She recollected the incident and told, yes, I saw you, and also told my mother. Srimati Padma accepted that and told that she neglected the words of baby since she didn't see anybody through the window. Swami explained, I was seen by that child only, since she was a great devotee in the previous birth, singing the songs of Mirabai. I always used to call her as Shyam Rasya because she was insisting me to sing that song whenever she sees me. The devotion in a child comes from the past birth as strong feeling called as samskara or vasana. Brahma Lahari is completed with this one song. Jnanam veha vibhutitva yatkinchit darsitam maya.
गुरोरेव चापल्यन्तम्
Namaskaram, sir.
नमस्ते. Then Bhakti Ganga.
Yes, Swamiji. Padnamaskar, Swamiji.
God bless you. Come on.
वाणी मानस बुद्धि तर्क समभ्रष्टाय नैव सागर लंघन संकुल वानर कुलमवलोक्य निज स्तुति लोलम जलधर चुंबी महाकृतिरेक पदक्रम लंघित जलनिधिरेवं रघुपति मानंद यस्य च सीता कुशल निवेदन हृदघन शाखम को नहीं वेत्ति कपीश जगत्यति संकट मोचन नाम तवेदं संकट मोचन नाम तवेदम् अहिकुल बंधन मोहित दाशरथि द्वयमालोक्य मनो विकलम् खगपति मानयसि स्म विकुण्ठा पुरगतमस्त्र विमोचन दक्षम् पुनरालोधन बलिनं वहसि च भुजयुगरूढं सोदरयुग्मम् को नहि वेत्ति कपीश जगत्यति संकटमोचन नाम तवेदं संकटमोचन नाम तवेदम् मूर्छित लक्ष्मण बोध समर्थ महौषधि संजीवी लतां नेतुम् उत्पत शिक्षण भद्रिमुपानय स्म करेण तमिव सुमगुच्छम् उत्थित लक्ष्मण करयुग वन्दन मालिंग सीविह संश्च सरागम् को नहि वेत्ति कपीश जगत्यति संकट मोचन नाम तवेदं संकट मोचन नाम तवेदम् शतमुख रावण हृत रघुनायक मंबाबलि पशुमुपगत मोहं पुनरानयसि च तमसुरमपगत जीवं विधाय पातालेशम् राघव शरमूर्ध्वमुखं कृत्वा नम्रं हरसि च युधि दशकण्ठम् को नहि वेत्ति कपीश जगत्यति संकटमोचन नाम तवेदं संकटमोचन नाम तवेदम् शृङ्खलया नियतशनैश्चर्मपि मोचयसि स्म शुचः सहसातं को मे संकट इह हनुमन् गुरु सोदर मां वदययादीनम् कथमपि योग्यो नाहं कारण करुणैव तव हि कारणनेकम् को नहि वेत्ति कपीश जगत्यति संकटमोचन नाम तवेदं संकटमोचन नाम तवेदम् वानरसिंह खगेश वराह हयानन पञ्चानन शिवरूपं वैष्णवतिलकं भविष्य जगतां धातारं त्वां नमामि देवं त्रिमूर्तितत्त्वं साक्षात् दत्तं परमब्रह्म हि लीलादासम् को नहि वेत्ति कपीश जगत्यति संकटमोचन नाम तवेदं संकटमोचन नाम तवेदम् हे कनकांशुककाञ्चन कुण्डल वन्दे त्वां हनुमन्तमनन्तं हे पिङ्गलाक्ष सद्गुणसागर मामव सततं मायामूढम् हे मेरुगिरिसमुज्ज्वल विग्रह पालय मान्तव पदयुगलोलम् को नहि व्यक्ति कपीश जगत्यति संकट मोचन नाम तवेदं संकट मोचन नाम तवेदं संकट मोचन हनुमद्देव महास्तुति मेतां गायति नित्यं यो मनुजस्य समेति शतायुर्बलमारोग्यं तेजो धैर्यं शतशत संकटजालमपि क्षणमेव विनश्यति याति सतोषम् को नहि वेत्ति कपीश जगत्यपि संकटमोचन नाम तवेदं संकटमोचन नाम तवेदं संकटमोचन नाम तवेदम् भज भज भास्कर कुलसञ्जातं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं भज भज भास्कर कुलसञ्जातं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं निष्काम भक्ति तपसा कृतं ज्ञानाग्निवचन तेजशातं धर्मस्थापन लक्ष्यमुपेतं साक्षात् नारायण मायातं भज भज भास्कर कुलसञ्जातं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं भज भज भास्कर कुलसञ्जातं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं वाल्मीकिसुकवि कविता गीतं स्वादर्श कथा गङ्गापूतं हनुमद्भुजा पीठासननीतं केवल सायक दशमुखपातं भज भज भास्कर कुलसञ्जातं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं भज भज भास्कर कुलसञ्जातं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं पट्टाभिषेक सुरसमवेतं वामाङ्कासन सीताप्रीतं स्वचरित गायक कुशलवतातं सकल चराचर सूत्रप्रोक्तं भज भज भास्कर कुलसञ्जातं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं भज भज भास्कर कुलसञ्जातं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं रामं शार्ङ्गधनुर्धरमेतं
9:50. Shall we play the Venkateshwara Pahimam also, Swamiji?
Yes.
वेङ्कटेश्वर 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 पाहि मां वेङ्कटेश्वर 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 रक्ष माम् ऊर्ध्वपुण्ड्रविलक्षणाङ्कितहालदेशसमुज्ज्वलम् सप्तशैलविभूषणं नव नीलमेघसमप्रभम् वामपार्श्वविलम्बिमौक्तिक दामचारुकिरीटिनम् वेङ्कटेश्वरमाश्रये मम किं करिष्यति वैकलिः हंसयोरुपरि स्फुरद्युतिशङ्खचक्रसुलक्षितम् चक्रवाकसमाकृति स्फुटकर्णभूषणशोभितम् स्वर्णवर्णधगद्युति नूतनाम्बरविभ्रमम् वेङ्कटेश्वरमाश्रये मम किं करिष्यति वैकलिः चित्रपुष्पसरोल्लसत्तुलसीदलात्मकमालिकम् वज्रमौक्तिकदामसंवृत चित्रविभूषणम् शोणपद्मविशेषहार परिष्कृतामलकन्धरम् वेङ्कटेश्वरमाश्रये मम किं करिष्यति वैकलिः च्यूतपल्लवकोमलाधरनर्तितस्मितसुन्दरम् चन्दनाङ्कसमुल्लसच्चुबकान्तकान्तिविलक्षणम् उल्लसत्तिलपुष्पसंमित चारुनासमनोहरम् वेङ्कटेश्वरमाश्रये मम किं करिष्यति वैकलिः धौतदीधितिमीनयुग्मकलालसत्कललोचनम् कामचापयुगप्रोरति सुन्दराकृतिभासुरम् वामपाणिविलोलसौरभ वर्षिकोमलवारिजम् वेङ्कटेश्वरमाश्रये मम किं करिष्यति वैकलिः दक्षिणादिगुणालयं शुभ सर्वसद्गुणसागरम् पापकूपनिमग्नजीव समुद्धरं धरणीधवम् अङ्गुलीयकवज्रदीधिति पाणिनाभयदायकम् वेङ्कटेश्वरमाश्रये मम किं करिष्यति वैकलिः उज्ज्वलाङ्गसुदर्शनाभिधचक्रखण्डितराक्षसम् सर्वमङ्गलदेवतारमयालसद्गुरुवक्षसम् शङ्खचक्रगदासिषाण्ड समाख्यपञ्चसमायुधम् वेङ्कटेश्वरमाश्रये मम किं करिष्यति वैकलिः यः पठेदिदमद्भुतं स्तवमुत्तमोत्तममागमम् सर्वकष्टविमुक्तिमेति सकृत्सुखं लभते नरः क्षीरसागरशायिनं परमाप्नुयात् परपूरुषम् वेङ्कटेश्वरमाश्रये मम किं करिष्यति वैकलिः वेङ्कटेश्वर 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 पाहि मां वेङ्कटेश्वर 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 रक्ष मां वेङ्कटेश्वर 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 पाहि मां वेङ्कटेश्वर 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 रक्ष माम् वेङ्कटेश्वर पाहि मां वेङ्कटेश्वर रक्ष माम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् ऋषिवराणां मानसालोलहंसाय मकुटान्तमायूरपिञ्छावतंसाय एकप्रहारेण विध्वस्तकंसाय श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् व्यत्यस्तविन्यस्तपादारविन्दाय मधुरामृतासारमुरलीनिनादाय जाज्वल्यमानां शोभिताम्बराङ्गाय श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् आकर्णतेजस्विनीनायताक्षाय प्रत्यूषपद्मांशुनेत्रच्छदयुगाय कमललोचनकान्ति सम्मोहनास्त्राय श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् आमुक्तमुक्तावलीजालहाराय गोपीतदीक्षीणनवनीतचोराय वृन्दावने वल्लवी विन्ध्यचाराय श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् सायङ्कने धेनुवृन्दानुगमनाय मार्गमध्ये वल्लवी कुञ्चिताक्षाय राधा जगन्मोहिनी मोहनाय श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् कालीयफणिफणा संशोभनटनाय काञ्चीक्वणकिङ्किणीनिस्वनाय गोवर्धनोद्धरणलीलास्मितास्याय श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् कस्तूरिकातिलकरेखाललाटाय तुलसीस्रगामोदवक्षकवाटाय पार्थाय विश्वरूपालोलभेटाय श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीरुक्मिणी सत्यभामा समेताय गोपीसहस्रेण संवेष्टिताङ्गाय रासे रसे सर्वदा सविनोदाय श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम्
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Parnasham Swamiji.
I told thrice
Yes, Swami.
Lord the song was beautiful. The singing of Devi is also beautiful. All the three, like Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, three beautiful. Lord's song was beautiful. The poetry of Datta Swami was beautiful. And singing by Devi is beautiful. Three
Yes.
beauties, like Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati. That is why I uttered thrice, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Correct, Swami.
Excellent.
Okay, Hari.
स्वामी परब्रह्म समारंभां श्रीदत्तात्रेयमध्यमां श्रीदत्तस्वामितां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां सर्वविश्वन्यस्तपादपद्मायते वामहस्तालोलवेदशास्त्रायते ज्ञानसूर्यायते दत्तरूपायते श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् गुरुदत्त श्रीदत्त प्रभुदत्त पाहि मां विधिदत्त हरिदत्त हरदत्त रक्ष मां पाहि मां दत्त रक्ष मां दत्त नमस्कारं स्वामी
Namaste.
నమస్కారం నమస్కారం స్వామి
పాద నమస్కారం స్వామి.
నమస్కారం స్వామీజీ. నమస్కారం స్వామీజీ.
నమస్కారం స్వామి.
నమస్కారం
నమస్కారం స్వామి.
నమస్కారం స్వామి.
నమస్కారం స్వామి.
Namaskaram, Swami. Namaste.
నమస్కారం స్వామి.
Namaste.
నమస్కారం స్వామి.
నమస్కారం స్వామి.
Namaste.
నమస్కారం స్వామి.
Namaste.
నమస్తే స్వామి.
స్వామి